Well, hey friends, my name is Andrea. This is Journals for Breakfast, and you are so welcome here. And sorry I missed you last week, feeling much better. Thanks for your kind well wishes as well. So, we have been talking about art journals for 2026. And in my last video, we talked about a collage journal as an art journal. If you'd like to watch that one, I'll link it in the description, but also feel free to just look at the videos, and the video before this one is about collage. But I mentioned in that video that I also started a watercolor journal this year, but I've also been doing watercolor, teaching myself watercolor for, as it turns out, the last 2 years. I actually had to look at my very first kind of stuff to see what year that was. I was thinking it had been 3 years, but it's been two. What that means is that I started teaching myself to watercolor at age 52. And so I mentioned the name of this video is Teaching Myself Watercolor Over Age 50, but any age is so welcome here. I think the reason that I felt like that was kind of relevant is because I've shared with you guys on Journals for Breakfast many times before that when I mention I'm a journaler, what I usually get is pushback. Whomever I'm talking to, 9 out of 10 people will tell me why they don't journal, or why they don't like journaling, or that they tried journaling and it wasn't for them. And it gets worse when I mention art journaling, because the pushback I get then is I'm not an artist. And I feel like I hear that especially with my age group and up. So 50, 60, 70. I'm not an artist. I couldn't do art journaling. And I've done a lot of thinking about where that idea comes from, that we are or are not artists. And I feel like one thing that might be happening, especially with 50, 60, 70, is this kind of thought that if I were an artist, I would have known that by now, right? Because I hear sometimes like, um, I was never good at drawing, so I just never pursued it. So they took a drawing class or tried to do some art in their teens or early 20s. It didn't stick, or they didn't love the result, and so deemed themselves not artists, and now in their 50s, 60s, and 70s have clung to that identity as a not artist. And so then the idea of starting an art practice, well, I've already learned, I'm already in my 50s, I'm already in my 60s, I know that I'm not an artist, and we're going to just throw all that away. As I shared in my last video, we are all artists because we are all human beings. I believe that with everything in me. I will die on that hill. Human beings are artists. What level, how professional, how far we take it, well, there's a lot of variables there, but we create. That's what we do. I was watching a video the other day on crayon making, and it was from like 1985. Do you know how many crayons we've made in this country since 1985? Billions, billions. Who are all those crayons for? Not artists. We're all artists. That's what we do. Um, but the 50, 60, and 70, here's the thing about that age group. I know because I'm in that age group. Many of us came up at a time in the 60s, 70s, and 80s when output is what was really taught to us as what was valuable. So it wasn't going to school, it was the grades that you got, right? It was your output, what you actually ended up with, final product, etc. We were taught that in school, we were taught that in our home, we were taught that in the workplace. We came up in an era when the concept of a workaholic woman was kind of cool. I've talked about this here before. Think about the movie Baby Boom and Diane Keaton and her role in that movie. She was a workaholic woman, and it was very admired. Yeah, so I think that our age group really got locked into the thinking that our value, our worth is very tied into our output. And in the world of art, that is challenging, because that then means that if I'm going to take up watercolor, the result needs to be a fabulous painting. And I am here to say that is not how it works in art. In art, the process is the value, not the result. The process is the value, not the result. And for those of us who are trying to break away from that production or output oriented value and find ways to recalibrate ourselves to remember that our value is just in our being, I think art is a wonderful place to practice that, because it's hard to find a way to make that happen in day-to-day life. But in art, you can really practice the concept that the process is the value, the result isn't relative. And so I'm gonna do some overhead and show you where I started, how I started, how it's going, what it's looking like. And I will continue to refer to that concept even in my own practice. I have to remind myself again and again that the final painting is not the value to me. It is just the process of putting the paint on the paper that's so valuable. In the world of art journaling, I think that one of the most wonderful things we can do is create a art journal, because just the word journal gives it privacy. If we're going to do this in its own small book that's just our own art journal journey, then the outcome is definitely not relevant, because we're not showcasing our journals to the world, right? If we go to a class and sit in front of a canvas, sheesh, that's output oriented really quickly, isn't it? That's result oriented. What is this final canvas going to look like? But when we just stay home and piddle around with paint in a little bound journal and close it and throw it on a shelf, it becomes very private. It becomes very protected. It becomes very safe. And that's exactly how I started. I started in this tiny little book. I will also say small is good for starting out, but for my girlfriends in their 50s, 60s, and 70s whose thought process has been, if I were an artist, I would have known that by now. I'm sure it's too late. Throw it out the window. You are an artist, you're a human being, but the result is not going to matter here. The process is what's going to be so much fun. And that's what I want you to really embrace and give it a try. Why watercolor? I'm going to say this briefly and then we'll go into some overhead. Personally, I feel like it is one of the easiest mediums to just jump into. You do not need much equipment at all. You do not need much investment in supplies. You can watercolor on essentially any paper. There is paper that is better than others, but essentially any paper versus, say, acrylic paint or oil paint. Now you got to get into canvases. You might need paint thinner to clean your brushes. You might need a really specific brush to work with it. I don't know much about those mediums, but that's partly why. They're just more complicated. It's not to say that they aren't a great place to go. If you already know that that is of great appeal to you, go for it. But I just feel like watercolor is inexpensive and super accessible. I think that anything you do with watercolor ends up coming out pretty, even if it's just blobs. I'm looking around because I have some fun stuff to show you. Even just blobs in watercolor are beautiful and they're really fun in a journal. If you joined us because the title of this said Learning Watercolor Over 50, and you are in fact over 50, welcome. I am also, and a lot of my viewers here are. But if you just kind of stumbled on this in the art journaling search on YouTube and you are under 50, I think there's plenty of stuff for you here too. Learning art is tricky. In fact, I have a girlfriend who's in her 20s, but man, she's very final product oriented. That's where her mindset has been for a long time. She's been in school and really studying and really working at specific goals. So to release her that and just go into dabbling with watercolor on paper is a big shift for her mindset, and I think it's a valuable one. She's enjoying it. So let's do some overhead, and we're going to talk about why I started, how I started. We're going to look at some of the processes that I used, the things that I actually painted to sort of get my hand in the right motion. We're going to look at beginner tools, things that can get you started, and we're going to look at my level 2 tools. I upgraded slightly this year, and that's it. We're just going to have some fun looking at watercolor. I'm really glad that you're back here with me, and let's go to some overhead. Okay, so here we are with a little overhead, and this little Montmartre sketchbook, such as it is, I think I got at Michael's or Hobby Lobby, something like that. And it's kind of moderately decent sketch paper. This is where I started the whole shebang, right in here. And I started with a process of painting feathers. Actually, side note, I started with a little online lesson of painting leaves. I'll show you the book where I got this lesson from. We're going to talk about that in resources. I started with leaves, but in the process of learning to paint leaves, what the instructor was talking to us about was the idea of like if you hold a brush, see how the tip of it is right towards you, straight up, and then what you get with that versus if you smash it down, and what you get with that as you kind of pull back and create shapes. So that was sort of the idea behind the very first lesson that I took, which is an online YouTube channel I watched, and I'm going to share that with you. But it got me into this mood to sort of try that sort of schmuzh kind of tip schmuzh move, and that is what I started doing. So April of 24, which is 2 years ago, I started making feathers in this book, and each day I would just come in and do a little feather. And I think that their success is moderate. It's, I don't know how many of these look like actual feathers. But what this practice allowed me to do was work with the brushes that I had and just try the concept of kind of making a point and then flattening out and making another point and then flattening out and making another point, getting some paint off the brush and creating some sort of dry edges. In time, I pick up a pen and I start to come in and do some drawing over it. I can build up layers as I go. And so this little book of feathers turned out to be a really fun start. It's a bound book with a cover on it, which means I could close it up and put it away, and no one was ever going to see it. I didn't have to worry if these were good, excuse me, good or bad. It didn't matter. The process is what mattered, and just playing with paint. I also was learning to mix colors at this time. I had bought 5 colors of watercolor in tubes. I'm going to show you those, and put them out on a palette. And then I was just mixing my own colors to sort of see what I could get from those 5 colors. And I really liked this one. This was, see how loose and weird this one is? I really like that. I think I probably got this paper wet and did some wet on wet there. So this is where I began. And if feathers don't appeal to you, but leaves do, that would be a good place to start. But this is how I moved through. Look at this. We're all the way, we're a month in and I'm still just doing feathers. So this would be my warm up each morning. My channel is called Journals for Breakfast. And the concept behind that is that I create something before I consume. So each morning I get up and the first thing I do is let my dog out and I go get a cup of coffee. And then I come back to this little room and I do something creative. I can write Dear Diary style journal. I can go into my 5-year and just do an update on the basics I keep there. I can do a little feather something before I pick up the phone, turn on the computer, turn on the TV. Consumption for me is screens. And so I always create before I consume. And it's just this simple little practice. And it just sets my day up beautifully, clears my mind, and gets me in the mood to move on with the next. So journaling for me is art journaling, writing, Dear Diary. It can be daily pages. It doesn't have to be. So I consider this a journal, FYI, an art journal. And yeah, so I just keep going with these feathers. Now, I'm a collage person, as you know, and in my previous video, I talked to you about that as well, that results aren't so much the issue, it's the process there and how much I've loved that. And at some point in this book, I start playing with putting a little bit of collage onto some of these feathers. There it is. That's the first one, a little blip of glitter paper on a feather. Look at this one. Now you can start to see some of my, that looks more like the collage you're used to from me. I loved this one, this sort of army green feather and this, can you see that? It's like ruled washi tape. Feathers, y'all. That's where I started. And then I did some collage around feathers. I did a landscape there for some strange reason. I did this one this morning. But the idea behind this is that it just gave me a place to practice the concept of using a brush in a few different ways. So at the tip of it, very pointed, at the widest base of it, very fat. And it just sort of wakes up my hand and gets my day started. So I will show you that. I'll show you that. I feel like I'm missing a paintbrush all of a sudden. I have a little bit of these paint sheets here. We'll just pick one. And so I like to just, and I balance my brush with my pinky. I just kind of put a little blop here and then come out. Blop here, come out. So I get started with the idea. Feathers usually have a little bone that runs down here, so I might fill that in a little bit more. And now I have this kind of canvas. I can start to pull some of that color in, fill that in a bit. And you can really start to play with some techniques in here. I can go with some wet on dry. I can go with some wet on wet. Start to have some fun here, right? So there's a feather. And you can see it's a very fast little process, and you get some really interesting results very quickly. And it's just a matter of sort of muscle memory, practicing that. I think that if you're kind of a woodland gal or a flower gal, you could get this by practicing petals the same way. Just kind of take a brush. I'll throw some petals in here. What do I want to use? Prussian blue, Persian blue, Persian blue. So if you want to kind of do some flower petals and just sort of see what any one brush gives you in the way of shapes for a flower. Steal some of that green, and get you a little stem action going. Right? So simple little moves in watercolor make some really cool results. And I will show you some tutorial books that you can practice some of that stuff with. But the idea behind this was it was as quick as a few brush strokes. It gave me something to kind of mess with. I could come back around with a pen and draw on it if I want to, or do some other things. But this is where it all begins, is with feathers. And then the next thing is just some just some swatches. Oh, I just got ink on that. So this is a sunrise, essentially. Water, horizon, sunrise coming up, right? But in the most generalized terms. So here's another one. Marsh, water, the horizon, and sunrise behind it. Yeah. So very interpretive. And these would have been on days that I just, again, it was just trying to move the brush across the paper and feel it. What does this paint feel like? What does this brush feel like? Do I want to get this paper wet and then go? Do I want to try it on dry paper? So just some practicing. Notice the size of things that I'm doing too, by the way. As a beginner, I always believe small is great because the pressure's off to fill in a lot of space. Just quick little drawings will do the trick. I move on. This is one of my very first books. This is a book that my friend Paula gave me, and this might be the very first painting I ever did, real close to it, because this is also in April of 24. So I'd done some feathers, and now I'm doing this marsh. I'll throw a photograph in here of this marsh. One tip I have is that if you are into beginning teaching yourself something, pick a topic and paint it again and again and again. Of course, feathers did that for me. You could do that with the same type of flower or the same style of flower, or you could do that with the same wreath of leaves, whatever it may be, but just do it over and over again. I picked a view that you guys have seen many times. It's how I close out my videos here, of the salt marsh that's closest to my house, and I paint it over and over. And that's what that is, technically speaking. There it is again. So this time with some trees, and there's the horizon and the sky going up this way with the marsh in front. This paper is not watercolor paper, and so it's warping. It's also pooling the watercolor in places. Who cares? It's like my second painting I've ever done in my life. So does it matter? Nope. Here I just went a different shape. It's the same horizon, marsh, trees, sky, just kind of a different deal. And this was in March, April, May, it looks like, of 24. Here's another. So you can see what's happening. I'm really just playing, right? What happens when I put blue on blue? What happens when I get the yellow and the blue together? Do they turn to green right away, or do they hold their own? Here's super loose. marsh, trees, sky. Yeah, a very interpretive version, I would say. There it is again with the water in front, the horizon back there. So it's just playing with that same view over and over and over again. So maybe you have something in your yard, a flower bed, a raised bed, who knows what, something. Here it is again. I'm just kind of trying to bring in the idea of the grasses coming in. I don't think I ever finished this. I think this was just sort of started and never finished, but that's fine. Now that here it is again standing back, and there's this palm tree that gets right in my face right there sometimes. Perspective is something I don't understand well and I'm working on. I'll show you a book on that too. Big blob of cloud that did not work very well, and you can see the ripples in the paper because this is definitely not watercolor paper. Perspective. I was really struggling with trees, so I just painted a bunch of them to just see if I could figure out how to make a tree look like a tree. And yeah, you can definitely tell that is a weird, where it is kind of strange. Very interpretive. It's July of that year, flopping around and creating skies. This gets better. This is also July of that year. But to me, I feel like I'm seeing some improvement now. I don't know, 3 months, 4 months into painting basically every single day, by the way, even if just for 15 minutes or so. So that's that book. And then I move on. Now, like I said, I started with leaves and branches. And why this paper is torn up is because these weren't pieces that I felt warranted like doing anything with. I tear them up and use them in my collage. So like those color swatches, I'll use that in a collage somewhere. So that's why this is all torn up. I've used pieces of it in collage work. But let's see. This is one of the very early ones that I did where that palm tree was right in front of the photo and then looking out to the marsh. And for a beginner, not bad, but the real point here was I was starting to play with better paper. This is more watercolor quality paper, and starting to see what the paint would do once it sat and dried, and then I layered up on it. Now I'm going to show you something pretty interesting here as we go through. I'm going to pull this painting back out again. So here's one that I did of the salt marsh. Here's the plants that tend to sort of be right in your face. Here's the water, here's the horizon. I started to get some little roof lines back there, but my perspective work is not good, so don't sweat that. And then I started trying to get skies that looked a little bit more like skies, and I will show you what happens with that because I went down a rabbit hole teaching myself skies. This one I always really loved, even though the perspective is terrible. That is not the right size for a bridge out there, for a, excuse me, a dock. But I like the sky in this one. I don't have a date on him, but I just happen to know because of my own memory that he's right in that same time frame around the summer of 24. So early on. This one is in August, late August of 24, and it's one of my favorites. I honestly don't know quite how I captured this in this way, and I want to figure it out because I love this. Now, the sky is not my favorite, but I'm going to show you skies, how I improve those in time. But how loose the interpretation of this landscape is in this really appeals to me, as does the colors. My color blending in this, I really like. So this one has always stood out to me as one of the ones that kind of made me say, keep going, keep going. This is the next year, so January of the next year, and you're starting to see things getting a little bit more realistic at this point. Even here, like look at the, sorry, I hit that mic. See the grasses I've come over with pen and really sort of toned those in a bit. So now they're starting to get a little bit more realistic, I guess I would say. It's one of my favorite palm trees I've ever done. Palm trees are tricky for me, and I really love how he came out. And now my skies are starting to evolve. See what's happening here? I'm starting to like what's happening here. And I ended up not doing anything landscape-wise. I just focused on the sky, and the rabbit hole for skies starts to happen around here too. Here we go. And now I start working on skies. And let me tell you something. In July of 25, if you saw me, I was looking upward. I took so many pictures of the sky. I would pull my car over and pull into a parking lot and take a picture of clouds that were forming up that summer. I got really into the idea of looking at the sky, and it carries on from there. But how much fun. And again, for something that doesn't need to be a final painting, this is just a sky with a horizon down here. But I just started really having fun playing with the paint. And this is what I mean about watercolor. I just feel like anyone can pick up a brush and start playing with the volume of water to paint, paint to water, the type of paper, and just really start having a good time with it. Here's a double wide. And this is at the end of summer of 25. So I'm a year and a few months in at this point of painting basically every day. So FYI, it wasn't fast for me. I like that one too now that I see it. Okay. My skies evolved. This is also that same summer, and this is really good quality watercolor paper. It holds a ton of water. And you can see, I mean, I feel like in this one I get movement. So that's something I'm starting to reach for. Evolution beginning, but it also still technically is just blobs of paint on paper. And let's see what's in here. Oh yeah, I wanted to show you this one too. This is a really nice watercolor pad that was a gift also from my friend Paula. And I got a little bit of stage fright with this because it's nice paper. I got a little scared that I needed to be good in this, and I wasn't using it. So I did what I share with you guys. I just changed focus. Okay, here's a picture of the salt marsh again. I think I've thrown a few into this video by now. But just so you know, I just keep painting the same thing over and over and over, just various interpretations of it. So I wrote myself, here's what I did to break the ice and get into this expensive pad of paper is I just put a theme photo, and then I just wrote some stuff about what I'd like to focus on in this book. I'm going to focus on a color study, on blending palettes, monochrome work, and maybe some shading and perspective and the horizon to kind of focus on what is not going perfect for me in my practice, such as it is. So I started by breaking the ice by just doing this. And you can do this today, right now. In fact, if you want to pause this video and go get a piece of paper and some paint, you can make this while we talk. Look at that. And you cannot tell me that this isn't delightful for the eye. If this is all you did in this book was just swatches upon swatches, perfect. I made a note here of what I blended to create these colors, but I'm very rarely that technical. I don't really care what I made. When it gets there, it gets there. I'm not going to try to repeat anything exactly. So formulas don't matter a lot to me. For a lot of artists, they do. They do not to me, not at this stage of my work. More color swatches, just blending. And this was just about getting my hands moving again, because again, I had some stage fright about this book. So here was one way to break the ice, just do splats. And then I did 4 skies over here, 1, 2, 3, 4. So I stayed with my idea of small, even though the page was big. I thought to myself, are you getting stage fright because the canvas is larger here? And so make it smaller. I just did smaller. And then here I let myself get a little bit larger. And that was kind of a fun, very interpretive sky. That is not a realistic sky to me, but it's a fun one. This one becomes a much more realistic sky. And I got these little condos down in the water. Again, I'm working on perspective or on the shore there. So that one, okay, getting a little bit better. Not a great sky, a better sky. So you can see, you know, I'm just playing with the idea of building up color. One thing about watercolor is that you build from the back forward. So your lightest stuff goes down and then you just keep adding and adding. That can be a lot of fun, and it also can be really frustrating because you can keep adding until you over add, but it also is part of the joy of it. So have fun with it. Here's a little sky triptych. And I think these are starting to get better. I guess by sky, what I'm really talking about, by the way, is clouds, aren't I? And that's really what I'm trying to capture here. Yes, it's a sky, but what I'm trying to capture are clouds that look like clouds. Let me tell you something. You may tell yourself there are no blue clouds, there are no gray clouds, are a lot of different colors, y'all. I have the photos to prove it. Very few of them are white. We do get big white pillowy clouds here, but even those have a lot of shading and stuff in them for around the corners and edges. This is one that I started and didn't finish, but it's that same estuary. Or actually, no, this is the back marsh. This is the one that's a little further from my house. So I put some photos in of it exposed at different lights and then did some color swatching to see what I might use within that. And then got a little painting started and walked away from it. That's good too. Leave things unfinished. This is one that's make believe. Basically, this is the marsh, right? But I made up the houses. There's some back there and there's some right up here. Again, it was just me trying to learn a little bit about perspective, getting a tree in front of that house where it was supposed to be. I don't know how successful that is, but it was a lot of fun to make. So that's what I did in that book. So we're moving through. And the most recent that I've done are these two. And I'll show you what this came from. But as far as results oriented go, these are two of my better ones. And these, I only put the year on it, which is too bad. I should have put the month, but it was basically towards the end of 25. So a lot of things are improving for me here as far as reality goes, realistic looks. I mean, that sky compared to, remember I told you I was going to pull this one back. I'll show you this one again. Look at that sky. And then that sky. So you can see how it started and how it's going. It's getting better. Does it matter? No. I love them all equally. They're all a lot of fun. Notice something about my paintings. Very few of them are bigger than this. I still think that smaller is better, especially for starting out. I just think it's less intimidating. And this is a little Traveler's Company water paper, or I don't think it's watercolor. I think it's sketch. This is back in 24 again. So right back at the very beginning. But look how small this is. And I really loved working in this. As you can see, these were the early days. So I'm doing some of that stuff you've just seen now, the progression of back in its early form. There's that marsh. Little feather. I probably did this before I did this, just to warm my hand up. This looks to me unfinished. So small is good. That's what I will say about that. I have shown you those little sketch pads from Hobby Lobby before that fit in your traveler size journals. Those work really well for small paintings also. You can buy postcard paper that's watercolor paper that's postcard size. Those are excellent to get started, but we're going to talk supplies here in a moment. Yeah, we'll talk supplies here in just a moment. Okay, here are, by the way, those little sketch pads I was mentioning. These come in packs of 4 from their Master's Touch, so you can get them at big box art supply stores. And they are kind of meant for sketch / mixed media, and I have done a lot of watercolor in these as well. And again, it's just the size that matters. It's just so nice and small. I don't feel intimidated about working in something like that. Supply wise, this is the first watercolor paint I ever bought. And I bought these at Hobby Lobby. I know that that is not your favorite place on earth. I understand. We do not have an art supply store, not just in my town, anywhere. Meaning I live in Northeast Florida. I would have to make it down to Orlando. So a good 2 hours, a little bit more one way to find an art supply store. So, and also I was teaching myself to watercolor for the first time. I just didn't want to invest hundreds of dollars into this and then discover that it didn't stick or I didn't love it or whatever. So what I did was watched a few videos online and listened to some artists talk about what their favorite colors were in their palette, the most useful ones. And then I went and bought kind of primary colors So Hooker's green, and then I got purple red, I got cadmium yellow, and then I had a indigo, and then I had a Payne's gray. Payne's gray is it's used to sort of take the tone of colors a little differently. So if you have a bright red and add a little Payne's gray, it can bring the red deeper, things like that. So I had that. I've used it all up since. And that is what I got started with. And then in time, I added cadmium red, yellow ochre, bright yellow, and permanent rose. And I worked out of these like mad. There were two more colors here that I've gone through and thrown the tube away. They were both in the blues, indigo. I already mentioned Payne's gray, and there was one other blue. I can't remember right now. This is all that I worked out of. Basically, everything you saw so far today came from these paints. These two came from my newer paints, which I'll show you in just a moment. But everything you saw prior to that, what I'm going to call, quote, cheap big box paint, did just fine. If you have a watercolor store, or excuse me, an art supply store near you, and you do want to go ahead and invest in some watercolors, you could invest in sets. So like a beginner set will have 6 or so colors that they feel like are the most versatile. You'll be able to make so many colors out of those 6 colors. I think that's a good way to go. Or you could just go build your own, find 5 primary colors, and then pick one that really jumps out to you as a fun color, and then pick something like a Payne's gray to blend things through. But you don't need to invest in much. You certainly don't need one of those 200 color palette deal-a-majiggies, just FYI. So this is where I started. And then I moved to quote unquote fancy paint, and that was Daniel Smith. And this was a set. This is a Daniel Smith set that you can find on Amazon, or they will have it at your local art supply store if you are lucky enough to have a local art supply store. And this is what came in his set. And I've been using it nonstop since I got it for Christmas. I still throw a few of these in now and then, FYI, but this basic set will do everything that you need in the world of watercolor to get you started. There's no question about it. It's just this particular set is probably, I'm going to say it's maybe anywhere between maybe $20 more than this would have been as a total. These are under $4 a tube. But the set seemed pretty reasonable to me. And I think it's a nice way to go because it is including colors that artists really know, blend, and do certain things for you that you may have a harder time figuring out on your own. So Daniel Smith, extra fine watercolors. Y'all, that's it. That's as far as I've gone. I have a couple little tubes of a specialty paint from another paint company, which is Beam Paints. And we can talk about those further down the road if you'd like. But for beginner watercolor, this is what I'm here to tell you. If you're unsure that it's going to stick and you just want to do minimal investment to begin, that's where you can start. Master's Touch, something like that. If you're ready to just go for it, I recommend the Daniel Smith. I also recommend Winsor Newton. And they also have beginner sets or like basic sort of startup sets. That's where I'd get started. The next thing is brushes. And let's see what I have in the way of brushes. This was what I was originally working with. Master's Touch, number 8 round. That's where I started. And this is an El Cheapo from the big box shop. I bought it the same day I bought these. I had this at the house for some reason. Creative Mark. I have no idea what brand that is, where that comes from. It's another number 8. I had this, as you can see, because it's so beat up. I have no idea what brand it is. It looks like it's a Winsor Newton that I must have bought somewhere along the way in my life. And it's a 6. I know you can't tell that here, but see, it's smaller than that. So that's a 6. This is what I started with. And then my friend Paula gave me this, which is really beautiful. This is a black velvet. It's a 10. And I did a lot of feathers with this because of that pointed edge. And then it can go fat right there. So this got added to the collection somewhere in 2024. I added this myself somewhere in 2024 because I thought it might make good petals, but then it turns out I never painted a flower. But I have used this for some things. I'll have to think about what. This is a Holbein, and it was not terribly expensive. And then this is the first expensive brush that I bought. This is an Escada 6, and I bought this on sale. It normally was $50, 50 for one brush, and it was on clearance, so I got it for 22. It's a weird brush. I don't know if it's just kind of too advanced for me. What it does is that it doesn't hold a lot of water or paint. No matter how wet I get it, no matter how much paint, it just doesn't hold much, which I think could be really useful for certain things, but maybe just not for my sort of beginner stance. I'm leaving that paint there because I love it when there's paint on my fingers. It makes me feel like an artist. Okay, so this is where I started, really, with those three, and then these were added in, and this took me through a year and a half of beginner painting just there. This year for Christmas, my husband gave me Princeton, and I am in LOVE, love. Love. So he gave me an 8, a 6, a 12. This is probably, yeah, that's a 2. I was thinking it was a 4 or 2. And then this offset. Funny offset. And this is all that I have used since he gave them to me. I've used them for absolutely everything. I love them. These were bought individually, I think. I don't think they were sets, and they were on Amazon. So Princeton. But I remember I took a watercolor class back in 1989, and I remember that instructor back then saying that if you buy Princeton brushes, you'll have them forever. They will just last and last. So there's those, and that is my new collection. And if I were really trying to be budget friendly and just get started, I would probably go something like that and go with a 12, an 8, and a 2. I think you could get away with those three for pretty much everything you're doing. Of course, it depends. You know, I don't know what you're going to paint. Neither do you, I guess. But yeah, I've really loved these. I think they're lovely. So Princeton. The pencil that I use is Blackwing. I don't always sketch things out in advance, but sometimes I will sketch kind of like, let me show you here. What I'll do is sketch kind of a general outline. So say I want to do that marsh, I'll decide that my horizon is going to be back here, and that I am going to include that palm tree. And so he's going to be here. And then I want to make some water back here, but I want to start bringing some plant life in this way and in this way. And I want to bring in some plant life here, and then another run of it as it comes out across the marsh there. So that's what I mean by, can you even see that? That's what I mean by a sketch. Like, it's super general because I'm going to splat this over with watercolor now and create skies and water down here. And then I'll start filling in with greens and making the actual scenery. So that's what I used for that, is Blackwing. I really like those. And what I have graduated to over time is coming back over some of my stuff with a pen. Now, a lot of watercolor artists will sketch, then go over with ink, and then go over with paint. But I often do the opposite. I from paint to ink. I often sketch, paint, and then come back with a pen and sort of redefine things a little bit. And I have examples of that in my art journal, so I'll show you those in a minute. We're still working on supplies. So those microns are good. They're waterproof. Oh, by the way, you want to make sure your inks are waterproof. So it will say on it somewhere, usually pigmented ink. That is, I think, usually a sign that it is water safe. Some of them actually say it. Waterproof and fade proof. So if you come in with this graphic liner and draw something, then you can watercolor over it. They typically will tell you that. Microns are as well. So I'm trying to find more subtle colors of these. The greens of these are too green, and black is too harsh. I've had some luck with the browns on these. But yeah, anyway, I'll show you some of that stuff. So some pins if you're interested, and then water. And I left this water dirty for a reason. So what I set up is a tray with one big jug of clear water. Well, 4 bottles of clear water. These are old yogurt containers, and this is an old jam jar. What I like is one clear. I keep one for warm colors, one for cool colors, and then this fourth one is because sometimes I'm working with metallics and sometimes I'm working with gouache. I'm not going to talk about gouache today because I don't think you need to know anything about it as you get started. But if I'm working with something weird like that, I like a fourth bottle for that. And then I just put a paper towel down in the tray because I will throw all my brushes in, get them all saturated, but then I don't want to leave them in there. So I'll just set them in here. And also often what happens is that I get some paint on a brush or some water on a brush, excuse me, and I just want to dab it off a little bit before I get going with the paint. So I just keep a paper towel in here. Plus it keeps these from sliding around and making noise. Sorry. And yeah, then I just take the whole thing, wash it all out, throw the paper towel away and start again. So a cheap clear tray. I mean, this could be, you could use one of those leftover Chinese to-go trays if you hang on to one. And 4 jars of various styles, brushes of some kind, some paint, and then you'll need a palette. This is a palette from a class I took in 1989, and I can absolutely still use the paint on it, and it is a cheap plastic palette. It was probably in 89, it was probably, sheesh, $3. So there's that version. I'll show you the one that I use now that I love. My palette, and I put the Daniel Smith set sticker on top so I'd know what paints came with it in case I got crazy and used up a tube and threw it out without keeping track, which is like me. But this palette was $9 at Hobby Lobby, and I adore it. I have no intention of ever changing this. I love this palette. Now, I've set mine up for colors that make sense to what I paint the most of. So I've simply gone with greens, a mix of sort of browny yellows, reds, and blues. I can make purple in here. I can make reddish browns in here. I can make greenish browns in here. Why would you want greenish brown? Because I paint marshes all the time. So I think you'll set yours up based on the things you're painting the most of. If you're doing a lot of flowers, you're probably going to have a lot of purple and green and really bright reds. I mean, who knows? So in my case, this is just what works for me. I also don't wash my palette. I leave that up to each individual artist. You decide for yourself. And yeah, I just blob paints together and see what I make. I love mixing my own paints, and I am not very particular about it. I bought a spray bottle at IKEA, and I'll spray the palette down to get it started like that. And then let's say I'm going to come in here and get started on some sky. I'll do my darkest blues first, kind of up at the top. And just sort of work that down. And the funny thing about water is it has a tendency to reflect itself further away from where it began. So this sky tends to be down here. And don't forget that your horizon runs the whole way. You can see this is not great watercolor paper, kind of grabbing and sticking in some spots, but that's how I'll get started. Then I can make some decisions. If I want to put some depth or make a little storminess in these clouds, and get a little of this Payne's gray in here and make a deeper blue. But see how I'm doing just right in the palette? I don't mind it. That's me. That's how I work. You do you, I do me. Let's get some storminess down in here too. Just create a little bit of shading there. One thing about clouds, by the way, is they get caught by the wind and they whip like that. A lot of clouds run kind of these horizontal lines. Took me some time to figure that out. Yeah, so you get where we're going? I love this. And I don't clean my palette. I just keep going and going and going. I am not trying to recreate the same painting over and over and over. Yes, I'm painting the same subject over and over and over. But my results, I actually don't want them to be the same. So I don't care about formulas. I don't care how much of that yellow ochre got into that red plus that green to create that shrub in that marsh on that day. It just doesn't matter to me. But you'll do you as far as that goes. And then typically I would let this dry a little bit, in part because I can't really pick it up. Well, I guess I'll have to leave it. Anyway, you saw how that went. Pick it up, set it over here, and close it. And it is very compact and very easy to use. I really love it. $9, big box store. Okay. Other supplies include paper. Okay, this is an area that gets tricky for beginner watercolors. Colorists, because you don't want to invest in expensive paper when you're not sure that you're even an artist and even going to be able to pull this off. I get it. But what I will tell you is terrible paper makes terrible paintings. Period. End of story. The paper will warp. The paint won't set right. You're not going to learn anything about how to build layers. So you're going to have to go at least moderate. So let's start there. And one of the most reasonable, Mikey's Arts and Crafts, $8. Now, I also probably bought this 20 years ago, maybe 15. But this is a Strathmore Bristol vellum, pencil, charcoal, pastel, technical pen, airbrush, and light washes. Oh, sorry, what I'm reading is down here. You can find Strathmore watercolor for probably about 14 bucks. That's where I would go. But this actually is not bad watercolor paper. And do you know what I've been doing with this watercolor paper? I've been using this for collage work for the bookmarks, but I have been doing watercolor bookmarks on this paper. So here's a sheet of bookmarks for the holidays that are it's in process. They're not done yet. And that's just one sheet of that paper, right? So, this is a great place to start. And here's what I do. I rip the page out, and you know me, here's what I do. I rip the page in half, and I usually rip it in quarters. Of course, you do not have to rip your paper. You don't need to be me. But I like rough edges. I like weird shapes. And if you want to go really small, do some little strips of flowers or leaves or something. Tear it into even small pieces. Why does this matter? Here's why. First and foremost, smaller paintings are less intimidating. Second of all, and you can just use a paper cutter and cut those up. You don't have to go rough edges like me. Smaller paintings are less intimidating. That's number one. Part two, a sheet of that paper just made me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 practice paintings. If I'm willing to go front and back, it just made me 12 for one sheet of paper. So you wonder why that pad is 14 years old? Because I can get a lot out of it. That's why. So you can go really inexpensively, even with more pricey paper. You get what I'm saying? You can really make a lot of use out of it. This watercolor paper, Bienfang, is excellent, and it's a heavier stock. Same thing though, you can already see I ripped a piece out here to make a little painting out of. So in that size, I would get 6 paintings off of a sheet of paper. Okay. So a little bit pricier, a little bit better quality. Here's my favorite. Everyone says Arches is their favorite. There's a reason. This paper is delightful to work with. It's expensive. This pad, 12 sheets was $20, but in Andrea's formula, 12 sheets, I mean, what is that, 52 paintings? It's a lot, right? So invest. Give yourself the opportunity. We're not going to get into cold press, hot press, yada, yada. We're not going to go there. You're going to try different things and see what works best for you. But yeah, Arches is what I absolutely love the most. I just get beautiful results. And the thing about Arches is that it holds so much water, so you can really build up layers if that's something that you're wanting to do. This was an interesting pad of paper. This is a really thick cottony paper. Like, I don't know if I'll be able to give you it's almost fuzzy. You see how thick and padded? It's been really fun to work with. I've only done one thing on it, but man, did that absorb some water. And I got this kind of mystic sort of version of the marsh with that. Really fun. When you don't know what to paint palettes. Just put paint down and spread, paint and spread. Make a little note for yourself about what you might be using that palette for. So play with some different materials and see what kind of results you can get. It's really fun to feel it out. Let's see, other paper. Here's another option. So this was a gift from my mom and Paula a couple years ago, and they went and got a paper sample pack. Now, this paper was like, oh, really big. Like, what am I going to say? 16 by 20. They were really big sheets of paper. Excuse me. Oh, 11 by 15. See, like really big, 11 by 15. I, of course, tore them into pieces so that I could get more out of them, but make them more accessible sizes to me. In these sample packs, what will happen is you'll get paper with a little sticker on it that will tell you what brand it is, so that if you like that paper, you can go to the store and look for that brand in that weight. Okay. I've used most of what was in this pack by now, so these are the last 3 brands left. But I really love the results that I get from these. This is really quality paper, and I typically will write on the back what it was. So this was Arches. And I assume this was too, because I did them both at the same time. So those sample packs, I think, are a great way to go if you can find them online, or if you go to an art supply store, they'll have them. Then you can try lots of different kinds of paper at once, and do what I do, cut them into small pieces and get a lot of use out of them. P.S. If you make a painting that you do not like, you are allowed to throw it away. What I like to do with paintings I do not like is I immediately tear them up and throw them into my collage stuff, because then they just become splats of paint. It's really not clear what they once were. And occasionally I have something I don't love. Now, I also hang on to paintings I don't like just as kind of reference. I'm going to show you that in the art journal just to remind myself that sometimes they aren't great. This has been one of my favorite papers I was gifted by Paula and my mom. And this is an easy block, which means it's taped down on all 4 sides. One thing about watercolor is that these papers want to curl when they get wet. So I tape them down often. Okay. And I just use painter's tape that I stole from my husband's paint supplies in the garage, and tape them down. So what's nice about blocks is that it's already painted, taped down. And this block is how I got these. What I did here, I actually put a piece of tape. You can see the edge right there. I put a piece of tape between these two and painted 2 paintings over the course of time. And then I pulled them out and tore them apart so that they were their 2 separate paintings. But you could use this, obviously, just as the size that it is. So that's a brand I've liked as well. I think it's worth having a combination of high-end, medium, and super low quality, because you're going to have a good time with all of it no matter what. I mean, I'm having fun with this already, and this is just garbage paper. So I think a mix. And some days you're just going to be feeling it, and you're going to want to get some good paper out and see what kind of results you can get. And some days you're just making blobs, and you're like, I'm not going to put blobs on my good paper today. I'm just going to move my brush around and have some fun. And that's a really enjoyable part of it too. There are some books you could consider. This is my fave, Everyday Watercolor with Jenna Rainey. What I recommend is definitely 100% go to her YouTube channel and watch her free tutorial on beginning watercolor. I think she is a wonderful place to get started. These were some stags I was doing Huh. Anyway, everyday watercolor, Jenna Rainey. And she is literally going to start teaching you how to hold a brush, hold a brush, hold a brush. So move your fingers, move your wrist, move your arm. Color swatches, painting circles, and yeah, you just get started right at the beginning of the book with her, or her lessons online, or use a combo of both. And she'll teach you how to do a little color palette, which is such a fun thing to start with. And then once they're done, man, this is going to be great in a collage, right? Just fantastic. I don't need a masterpiece of artwork here to make some pretty things. She will teach you about, here's day 10, light source and shading. So beginner watercolor with Jenna Rainey. I very highly recommend her YouTube videos and her books. She has several books, but everyday watercolor I think is a great place to start. Everyday Watercolor Sketchbook is a bonus piece you can buy. And it's her favorite watercolor paper. So it's good quality paper, but in a small form. You didn't have to invest in a ton of it. And what she's put here are barcodes. And so if you scan this, 10 Easy Wildflowers, scan that on your phone, it'll take you right to her YouTube channel. And you can do that tutorial on her recommended paper. So that's a cool beginner book. Another book is from a friend who told me about this when I first got started, Painting Calm, Connect to Nature Through the Art of Watercolor. And it's a beautiful book. One, just buy it and read it. Look at her artwork in here. But such beautiful things. And same thing, like just creating color swatches. How enjoyable that is. Look at her basics on fruits, olives. Just a beautiful little book and great tutorials, great ideas, rules of third. Yeah. So if you're like a follow along in a book kind of gal, Painting Calm, I highly recommend it, but it is also fun just to read her thoughts about keeping your eye. You know, one of the things she talks about is that if you start painting, you start noticing. And so when I go out on my walks, I mean, my eyes catch things that I don't think they would have ever caught if I had not picked up this brush 2 years ago. I just see things differently. And again, the cloud gazing, what that taught me, looking up at the skies about what clouds really look like and how they really move and what color they actually are. If you'd asked me what color a cloud was, I would have said white or gray. Then it turns out there are lots of colors. The one book I've invested in that hasn't worked for me is Perspective Made Easy. I think I need Perspective Made Easier. I am not getting it. I don't get it. I have no sketch history whatsoever. But now that I've been at this for a little while, I'm going to give this a shot again. But see, what happens to me is when I try to draw like a brick, see how the front end of the brick is tipped down towards me? That's what always happens. So see, I was trying to get these docks out in the marsh and they kept tilting. They kept tilting towards me instead of being a dock. It was a dock. I could never get it. So anyway, this one has not been particularly useful. So just FYI on that. Okay, and then art journals. This is that Archer and Olive 8x8 that we've talked about last week or 2 weeks ago, because this is what I'm using for my collage art journal this year. Remember we did this collage together? I started another one too. Where did I start another one? Yeah, started another one here. I love collage so much. Okay, anyway, that's a different subject. Same thing, stage fright. It's a big 8x8 page. What is the first thing that I did? Splop on color. This is, by the way, that marsh. There's the sky, there's the sun, it's glowing down on the water, and here's the grasses. How's that for interpretive? This is an example. Oh, look at this page. I love this page. Just color. And then I did some splatter work on it. Just have some fun. Just have some fun. That's it. This is a shed that is on a piece of property not far from my house. There's the shed. And there's my interpretation of it. You can see my perspective is not great. It's just not what I do well. But what I was trying to do here was practice some things. I started with a pencil and just did a basic sketch of the shed, as basic as my little perspective self allows for, okay? Basic outline. Then I came in with really loose watercolor, did the plant life. Then I came in with tighter watercolor, getting some shading and stuff in. And then I came in with a pen and did some line work in here, cross hatching at the step, things like that. So that was a fun, just sort of build it up based on that original photograph. These are some minis I did of that same shed. This one, as you can see, got really overworked. It's one thing about watercolor. All of a sudden you look down and go, oh my gosh, I added too much paint to that. But that's part of the process. That's the fun. And then I did this one of the marsh, of course, and I do not love it. It got really, to me, tight, and that's in part because of all the line work I did. I don't think these two trees make any sense whatsoever perspective-wise. There's just a lot of flaws in this to me. So without being my own worst critic, I just left it there. By the way, if you hate something that you do, you can rip that page out. You're allowed. It's your stuff. You do what you want to do. I left it there to remind myself to loosen up, and I went back to some cloud work just because that's what I love, and it's where I just find some looseness in my hands. So I did a little palette and some cloud work to just free my hands up. And then I did some color swatches. Again, it was just about have fun, get color on paper. What I'm going to do with this is put in some quotes over it of some of my favorite quotes about the year of the fire horse, which is technically beginning, I think, next week. How about that for interpretive marsh? I can't even get the whole thing in here. But now you see, and I do the same landscape again and again. So here's my clouds, here's my horizon, my water reflection, and my grasses in the front, right? Loose. I was just trying to go really loose. This one I was playing with some brush pens. That was the point of this. So I put this sort of background together, but my point was to work on working with some black ink brush pens and some kind of burnt umber ink brush pens to see what sort of results I got. There's a little watercolor collage. So little pieces. These are little end pieces. When I make bookmarks, I have to lob off the end of the piece of paper so they fit into the sleeve. So I end up with these little squares of watercolor paper. So I just did some swatches and a little bit of line drawing on those. So watercolor journal. What I love about a watercolor journal for you is that you then put the closure on it and tuck it away. No one need ever see it. And it gives you privacy. It gives you some freedom. That paper in that book is not watercolor paper, of course. This is a book you guys have seen here before. It's my 100 Tiny Paintings. This is also not watercolor paper. So what I did was tore up pieces of watercolor paper and taped them to the book. You could do that in that Archer and Olive too. So tore real watercolor paper and then taped it on or glued it on is how I did this book. And this has been a fun book too, to just play and see what I can learn about myself and my practice. I've made a lot of things in here that I hate. I've made a few things in here that I like. But I leave them all in here because it doesn't really matter if I hate them or like them. It's a process, right? Yeah, so I've had a lot of fun with this process too. This was a challenge to do 100 tiny paintings in a year. I've made it to, excuse me. I've made it to 73. I got 73 done in the year. Not bad. So, watercolor for beginners. Let's go face to face and chat one more time, and we'll wrap up this very long video. Okay, that was a lot. I hope you enjoyed it. I would love to hear in the comments if you're going to try watercolor, if you've already started, if this inspired you to get going again. I would love to hear it. I mentioned in the opening that I was going to talk while we looked at all our paintings about why I started this, and I don't think I actually did that. And I will just simply say, because it's a long story, but in my process of breaking away from workaholism and burnout, I started creating morning routines, which I've mentioned here, journaling for breakfast, and I was just looking for an easy sort of art resource in the mornings for the days I didn't feel like proper journaling, like daily pages or Dear Diary or something like that. I just wanted some little creative outlet. When I make collage, it's messy. There's just paper everywhere, and sometimes I'm not in the mood for that. So I just thought watercolor might be a good thing to try, and it turns out it was. I'm really happy that I jumped into it. Um, I will Oh, I grabbed the wrong book. Excuse me. I will remind you that what matters to me most is the process, not the result. I mean, I love this. Absolutely love it. And the process is what mattered. It was just so much fun. So I found a quote for us this week that can kind of serve as a journaling prompt. Maybe it's a quote you want to write into your watercolor journal. Who knows? But I think it's a really lovely one because it starts to pull together things we've talked about in the last 4 videos. And it is this: every time you choose authenticity over approval, you retrain your nervous system to trust truth over performance. I love that. I'll write it in the description for you too. Every time you choose authenticity over approval, just be you. Be you in whatever way you can be. We're trying to break away from the idea that our value is locked into our output. It's challenging for my generation. I think it's challenging for a lot of generations, but just be you. Because everything that you do, if it is authentic, it is gorgeous and it is wonderful, right? Um, Approval goes out the window. Results go out the window. It's just not what matters. What matters is the process. And I think that watercolor gives us a really great place to practice that concept. I appreciate you being here. I am probably going to be doing videos more bi-weekly for a little while. I have a couple projects I'm working on that I will ultimately share with you guys too. There's kind of a lot happening in the world for us right now. But probably bi-weekly, and also just some bonus ones here and there in the middle of the week. So what I would suggest is to subscribe and hit the notification button. And then that way, when I do post something, it will just pop up that it's there. You won't miss anything because they're just not going to be as regular as the setup. I've been doing Sunday mornings at 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time drop, and now they're going to be more random than that. Yeah, so that's it. Subscribe and hit the notification button. The description of this video is going to have a lot of info in it, so I hope you'll take a look at that. A lot of great resources, but don't ever hesitate to message me directly on Instagram, where I am also Journals for Breakfast. I'll be happy to send you links to my favorite YouTubers, things like that. And yeah, I hope you enjoy the process. Stay authentic. Remember that the process is what matters, not the results, and you are valuable always, just exactly as you are. Have a great week.